being in attendance tonight. We were just commiserating on the state of the breaking news around us in this exciting post-election time. That makes me thank you doubly for caring enough to join us on what is actually the first anniversary of First Thursdays. We started this program 1 year ago, and back then the idea was to get you into the law library. With COVID, we decided that the best thing we could do is come to you. And we continue our efforts tonight, and I must speak out and make reference to our board president, Chris, who is here tonight, and our law librarian, Lori. Without them, these programs would not be available, and their continued assistance to our outreach to the community is more than commendable. We're very, very lucky. I will also make reference why we're here. First Thursdays came about after another event through the law library, which just had a 4-year anniversary, and that would be our Lawyers in the Library. This program here in Marin County was initiated back in October of 2016. Happy anniversary, and may I give a special call out not only to the people that are here tonight, and that would include the efforts of Lori and Chris as they've moved us to a platform which is in the works to return lawyers to the library, or Lawyers in the Library online, but they have continued to support this program now in its 4th year. A special thank you to Alexandria Quam, who was the first liaison to this program, followed by Emily Vance. These 2 board members were instrumental in helping run this program, along with our past board president, Jonathan Freeman, and Vice President Sam Ware. Be aware that a lot of these folks not only sit on the board, but they volunteer for Lawyers in the Library. So this 4th year anniversary is significant. We can't name them all tonight, but in addition to the board members that I've just mentioned who are volunteers and participants, may we give a special call out to all of the attorneys who have given some amount of time to supporting this program. And in addition, may we thank the Marin County Bar Association, who not only helped us as we put this program together, but to continue to support us. How did First Thursdays come about? It came about from some of the information that we learned from hosting Lawyers in the Library. We found the questions that people were asking, the folks that were coming, pointed us to even more development of programs to assist folks in learning about resources. If you're familiar with Lawyers in the Library, you know that that's roughly a 20-minute opportunity to consult with an attorney. The point of First Thursdays was to also provide an opportunity for Marin residents to learn about the numerous agencies that provide services to the public at no or low cost. The question for everyone is, who are these agencies and how can they help you? 1 year ago, we began with Brian Morris from the Marin County Public Defender's Office. Tonight, at this 1-year cusp, and we've successfully brought this online and hope to be making these recordings available to the public at your leisure. We welcome Ambar Chavez, who comes to us from the Marin County District Attorney's Office from a really unique unit. I know when we think of the District Attorney, we realize that there's a great umbrella, but the one we want to bring attention to tonight is the Consumer Protection Unit. I want to thank Amber and her assistant for making this event possible and for giving their time so generously. Amber, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure and a treat to be here tonight, and I appreciate the board and everyone at the Law Library, and just really grateful for the opportunity. Because I am a lawyer, I tend to start with disclaimers, so I'll go right on in. And my first one is, any views or opinions that I express tonight are my own and do not necessarily reflect or represent the views or opinions of the Marin County District Attorney, the Board of Supervisors, the County of Marin, or any other governmental entity. And the second one is, because I am a government attorney, I cannot give individual legal advice or act as anyone's personal attorney. Yeah, so I just want to thank everyone for joining me today to learn about, as you said, a very special unit. It's near and dear to my heart at the Marin County District Attorney's Office. We are the Consumer and Environmental Protection Unit. I know this year has been rough. It's been challenging. It's been very different. There's been a lot of uncertainty. There have been a lot of folks who have a lot to worry about right now. Many people are worried about their finances, about their health, about their jobs. And I hope that tonight my discussion can help people find resources and perhaps help people avoid falling prey to different scams that are out there to take advantage of people who are in financial dire straits, or who are, desperate for a cure for a disease, or who really just want to believe. Some of the scammers out there who take advantage of people during challenging and difficult times. So what is the Consumer and Environmental Protection Unit? Firstly, we are the only civil division in the Marin County District Attorney's Office. So most people think of the district attorney and they think of law and order. They think of, crimes and jail and, law enforcement in that very traditional sense. And while the bulk of our attorneys do that, we have the Consumer and Environmental Protection Unit, which does primarily civil law, which means anything that is not criminal. So we are, as a general matter, not putting people in jail for consumer violations of law, though, there's always an exception, but typically we're the civil unit. So we investigate, mediate, and prosecute matters that involve consumer transactions and or the environment. And we review lots of consumer complaints about consumer transactions or the environment, which could include complaints about, it's a pretty broad spectrum, but just some examples. It could be overcharges at grocery or retail stores. If there's a sale price and you don't get the sale price, or if you are, you weighed something and you're being charged the wrong price for bulk at the grocery store, or it could be, the California refund price being charged for the wrong item. All those weights and measures issues, we work closely with the Department of Weights and Measures to take a look at those complaints. We get a lot of government imposter scams. Some of them we can handle, some of them we might refer, but I know recently I got a mailer because property taxes were due, and as tends to happen around the same time of year, people get these mailers from a fake governmental entity. In this case, it was, the Benefit Suspension Unit of the County of Marin, which does not exist. And it's saying that they're going to seize your Social Security benefits, they're going to garnish your wages, they're going to levy fines against your property for some debt outstanding to the state of California. There's a lot of very formal language on it. It quotes the tampering with mail provisions of the federal United States Code. And so, for the average consumer, that's a pretty scary piece of mail to receive. So these are the kind of things that people will call us and say, I got this mailer, I don't know what to do, is this real? And we try to help guide people to say, look, there's no benefit suspension unit. If there were a levy against you, if there were a lien put against your property, you can take a look at the county recorder's office to see if there's anything. And we just help people provide resources to help assure them that it's okay not to respond to these scary government imposter scams. And sometimes we're able to take action. It really depends on the mailer. We do see, like I said, a lot of deceptive mail, email, text message campaigns. People call us about robocalls. We see financial frauds and scams quite a bit. That's been ramping up, as tends to happen during challenging times. So it could be about loans, it could be auto loans, student loans, investment opportunities, things like that. We see a lot of false and deceptive advertising claims. So we've seen a lot of claims, for example, about products that are immunity boosting, products that are making claims about, strengthening and perfecting your immune system against, global viruses. Some of them go a little further than that, but there's a lot of implications there. for folks. We also see a lot of claims, products that are supposed to help people with, let's say, Alzheimer's or diabetes, different health and disease claims for products, mostly dietary supplements that are not properly registered and haven't been through the proper trials and vetting from the FDA or the California Department of Public Health, and work closely with them as well. We might see some product warranty claims. We might see claims about auto sales or repairs. Those are sort of our consumer transaction claims. We see of the environmental complaints, we see it might be wasteful packaging. So there's a California Slackville Law that essentially regulates kind of how much product is supposed to be in a container. And for lack of getting too much into detail, a consumer has a right to know how much product they're actually getting in a container. And we take a look at some of those claims. So, if you buy a bottle of vitamins or probiotics or something and you open it and it's only 10% full, that's the kind of thing we get some complaints about. Or, toothpaste complaint we had recently where it was a gigantic bottle of toothpaste, or a gigantic box of toothpaste that had, 6 containers in it, and it was next to another box of toothpaste that had 6 containers in it, but the boxes were deceptively filled to make them look like they had the same amount of toothpaste, when one had about half as much as the other, and cost $10 more for the pack, right? So these are, and that kind of thing adds up. So why we're here is if there are enough consumers and enough sales, in Marin, or it affects the Marin County residents, not a lot of consumers would necessarily go to the trouble of filing a lawsuit for $10, right? But we can aggregate essentially some consumer complaints to the extent that that's pervasive in the county, right? And we also have received complaints about illegal dumping of certain substances, whether it's batteries or oil or other types of things like that. So that would be kind of the more popular environmental complaints we get. We also review complaints that are property related or are more of a person to person rather than a person to vendor type of a transaction. So that would include landlord tenant complaints like repairs, complaints about security deposits, rent increases, and the like, which hopefully there aren't too many right now as there is a moratorium, but we do foresee more of that coming to us in the near future. Real estate property sales, easements, drainage, land use, encroachments, that sort of thing. We also have a dedicated real estate fraud practice. So anytime there's fraud or deception that relates to the recording of a document, so it's a deed or a lien or anything that gets recorded on your property at the county recorder's office, if there's a deceptive practice or fraud relating to that, there's a fee for recording, and part of that fee goes to our unit to investigate those real estate frauds. We look at homeowner association complaints about fines, assessments, and other disputes, common area disputes. We get neighbor complaints, those are noise complaints, fence complaints, common facility complaints. And then we get animal complaints about dog bites or vicious animals, noise like barking animals or roosters, or encroachment on property by like peacocks or horses and things like that. So that's kind of in a nutshell the complaints we see and we address. We have, to utilize our services, you can email us at consumer@marincounty.org. It's consumer@marincounty.org, or you can give us a call at 415-473-6495. 415-473-6495. Most of the issues, the complaints that I listed, would be handled by our non-enforcement unit, which is typically staffed with 2 mediators who work there full time. And we have a number of volunteer mediators who work different shifts throughout the week as well. Some of them are former attorneys, former accountants, and every so often we are looking for additional volunteers to go through that mediation training. So that is something, if you have an interest in or know someone who might be a good mediator, it can't hurt to reach out to our office. I should mention that the mediation process in our office is voluntary. So we cannot necessarily force your landlord or your local grocer to come to our office or to obey some order, that our mediators would put down. We try to engage both parties and reach a solution, and hope that the parties who agree to participate in the program will live up to the agreed upon resolution. It is free. I should have said that up front. It's free, the mediation process, to all residents of Marin, or if it involves a business that's located or headquartered in Marin. If you're not certain who might handle a particular type of complaint and I didn't list it, you're welcome to call our consumer line. We have a lot of resources for different groups around the state. We get a lot of contractor complaints, some of which we refer to the Contractor State License Board. Some of the auto dealership complaints we refer to the DMV Investigations Unit. And we work very closely with a lot of the different consumer affairs and consumer units around the county and around the state. So, if you're not sure if it's something we can't handle, we are happy to refer you to the appropriate authority or work with them to get those matters handled. For matters that sound a little bit more in fraud or deception, trickery, and just, the type of business practices where maybe it's more of a scam, a fly-by-night, and wouldn't be able to operate in the bounds of the law without some type of trickery, we do have our enforcement unit, which consists of 2 attorneys. One is Andy Perez, or Andres Perez, and the other one is me. As I said, I'm Amber Chavez. So I guess before I, that's us in a nutshell, but before I open up the floor to questions, I just want to give my top 5 or so tips on ways to avoid becoming a victim of a scam or a fraud. The number one thing I say to people is take your time. And what do I mean by that? Well, a lot of times scam artists, when they call you or they email, they create a sense of urgency, right? Oh, immediately you have to get us your payment. Oh, something's happened. There's a deadline. You've already been sued. The police are on their way to your house. There's a warrant out for you. Your bank account's going to be levied, if you don't give me your financial information right away, right? And people tend to get very scared. It's the kind of thing where they want to trick you into giving them your information as quickly as possible right now before you take the time to do your research, to do your due diligence, which is my tip number 2, do your research, verify that you are speaking to who they say they are. Imposters are everywhere. It's really easy to fake or spoof a telephone number, to change one letter in an email address or a domain name so that you might not catch it if you click on the email address. Websites can sometimes be deceiving and can be redirected to different places. So one way my tip number 3 is it leads me to, talk to someone. If you're not sure, if you've done your research and you just don't know, you don't feel confident about the person that you're talking to, and you've kind of taken that time, talk to someone. Have a buddy, have a relative, have someone that you can talk to about suspicious phone calls, emails, websites, letters, and so on. And, if you don't have someone that you feel that comfortable talking to about that, you can call our consumer line, right? I mean, that's what we're there for. We have people who can get you the right resources, who will ask the right questions, and who can guide you and hopefully provide you with a little bit of comfort. Again, that phone number is 415-473-6495. And, pass it on, right? I mean, talking to someone can prevent your friends or your family from being scammed or defrauded. If they receive similar types of letters or emails, then they go, oh yeah, I got that too. That's so weird. They said this to me. Someone I know called me and was like, oh my gosh, Google called me and they said my computer email was hacked, and, I had to immediately send them, iTunes gift cards in $500 increments. And I said, first of all, take your time. Secondly, think about this. Google will never ask you to pay them with Apple's money, right? So that's a red flag. If you take your time, you take a step back and you think about what's going on. Google doesn't want Apple's money. Google wants Google's money, right? And there are all these little indicators of fraud. There might be typos in the letter, or there might be strange wording a lot of times that happens. So if you take a step back, you talk to someone, you might find out, or you might prevent someone else from being defrauded. Number 4, be skeptical. That's if it sounds too good to be true, it more than likely is. It usually is. Number 5, I tell people to hang up on robocalls. I just, not a whole lot of good comes from them. They have their purposes. If you have a doctor's appointment or your prescription is ready, if your kid has school is closed or something like that, certainly that they have their purposes, but a lot of times there's just not much that comes from a sales call. Most of the sales calls by robocall are illegal. And if you press a button and you think you're going to be put on a do not call list, what's actually happening is you're being put on what's called a sucker list. So they know your phone number works. They know you're going to engage with them. They know that they can call you and that they can sell your phone number to their friends who will then start calling you. So once you press number 1, instead of getting put on that list and having your number taken off, now you're getting 10 times more phone calls because you're on a list that's being sold. And that number and that interaction is valuable. And I like to keep it at 5, but number 6, I do tell people, sign up for consumer alerts from places like the Federal Trade Commission or the AARP. I also like fraud.org, and our unit publishes a consumer tip every Tuesday in the Marin IJ. So keep an eye out for those, just like one tip relevant to the times that comes out once a week. Those are kind of my hot takes on how not to be victimized or become, get scammed. That's pretty much my remarks about our unit, what we see. I'm happy to open up the floor for questions at this point.
Amber, may I comment that the consumer tip column is really valuable. The most recent came at a really timely moment because of the robocall scams around Election Day. But looking back, a couple of weeks ago, you touched on issues about property deed scams, tax lien scams. I know that we've added a link to your column, but it's really worthwhile to read, and I very much appreciate what you're doing with this.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. I try to find relevant tips based on what's going on, what we're experiencing. The property and tax lien scams were happening as the property tax bills were being mailed to residents of Marin. So we try to mirror what's happening and what people might be seeing. So certainly I appreciate that. Thank you.
Hi, Amber. My name's Emily Smith.
Hi, Emily.
Hi. Thank you so much for this talk. It's been very educational and interesting. Could you describe some of the larger cases that your unit has worked on in recent years?
Sure. So this is, well, I've been there for 2 years. And I know there are a number of larger cases that we work on with other counties around the state. One that got a lot of press was we have a task force where we work with 8 other counties about deceptive food, drug, and medical device claims, disease and health claims. And so we sued and settled with Goop, which is Gwyneth Paltrow's wellness company, for making certain claims about women's reproductive health. We recently had a large suit that we engaged in with a number of other counties, as well as the California AG, Attorney General rather, relating to excessive amounts of lead in infant and toddler formula. That was more along the environmental side. There were some false advertising claims because they claimed the products were very safe for children and babies. I'm trying to think of what's public and what's not, so excuse me for the pause. Let's see. There are, I might have to get back to you. We do issue press releases from time to time. We have some pretty large scale investigations going on right now. I know one involves funeral homes and some deceptive, we're working with other counties based on some deceptive claims made to families of the deceased about what is required or by law and the timing. And there's some urgency and deceptive claims being made there. We have a couple of some of the wasteful packaging claims that we've gotten involved in against very large consumer companies, you know, like the Procter and Gamble's. Let's see. We had, I did somewhat of a large statewide case that involved false claims about a supplement that claimed to be able to increase the amount of breast milk that nursing mothers would produce by eating this bar. They claimed a certain number of ounces. You eat one bar a day, and they had no proof at all about that, but they were able to charge a premium, and the products were sold at Target, at Walmart, on Amazon. It was featured on Shark Tank, and you know, it was a pretty, it had a pretty wide market share in terms of lactation bars. Those are some of the examples that come to top of my head.
And if you collect fines or penalties, does that money go back to your unit or the county or the state or where?
So if we collect penalties, that money goes to the regulatory units that are enforcing the laws. So it'd be our office and any other attorney general or district attorney or city attorney office that prosecutes. If we seek restitution, civil restitution is a pool of money that we seek, and that money goes back to consumers. If the consumer group is too difficult to identify to provide restitution, sometimes we seek what we call cypre, which is a type of restitution, you know, for a good cause, essentially. And so that might go to a nonprofit or to, we have a consumer protection prosecutors trust fund that funds some of the county prosecutions and matters, especially for some of the smaller counties like ours who have a little bit of a smaller budget. We are the only unit at the DA's office that actually brings in revenue. And so we pay for some of the salaries, some of the staff, and then we fund our unit.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Amber, I'd like to ask you, oh, by the way, Andy Perez, I think, got more than $1 million settlement someplace behind trash things behind Safeway stores or something like that a couple of years ago.
Yes.
Because there was no senior information fair this year, I imagine you've had a difficult time getting word out about what you do. You might consider sending some bulletin board flyers out to the apartment complexes throughout Marin aimed at the tenant associations for posting, just to get the word out that way, since people are pigeonholed in their units still for the most part.
Yeah, you know, thank you for that. We have been trying to adapt and figure out how to reach some of the prior communities. We didn't have our 4th of July fair this year, and we didn't have our senior fair this year. So I certainly will take that to our outreach program coordinator and see what we can do as flyers wise, and see if we can coordinate something with some of the multi-unit complexes.
Amber, can you tell us a little bit about the experience that you might have, or someone coming to your agency might have with a landlord-tenant issue that might include repairs, cost of repairs, security deposit? What kind of experience might they expect visiting you?
Okay, so this is, again, it is voluntary, right? So this is assuming that the landlord agrees to participate. What generally happens is, you know, we receive a complaint, we assign it to a mediator, and the mediator then does some initial research, due diligence, discovery. They collect, all the documents and information from both sides and set a time to bring the parties together. Obviously now it would be virtually, but to discuss the issues. First our mediator generally tries to frame what the issues are from both sides, and it's really, it depends on the parties. It could be that they talk to one side and then they talk to the other side separately. It could be that they try to bring them virtually together. It depends on the nature of the claim, how adversarial it is. They try to tailor it based on the experience, but as far as repairs go, it's a similar process for repairs or security deposit. They really sort of look at the history, and then each of those is so fact intensive that it's really on a case-by-case basis. They don't usually decide things on the papers unless there's really not a there. But it could be one session, it could be multiple sessions. They will sit there and work out with people. I've seen our whiteboards full of math equations and potential resolutions, and they really try to gather, a medium. I don't know if I'd say a happy medium, but a compromise that works for both parties as best as possible so they could move on. Thanks for the question.
At this moment in time, with a lot of uncertainty and a lot of movement in financial markets, we have a really large demographic aging population. Are you seeing more? Are you hearing more? Are people aware that they should be contacting you about outreach that's suspicious from, either local or long-distance financial salespeople?
What do you mean by financial salespeople?
Well, it's not unusual at times like this for people, you made reference to the value of emails, of contact information. To make a cold call, you actually need to have information. So, people do sell other broker dealers information, and, this is an affluent area.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. So what I see in that area and what I have seen, I don't think it's necessarily gotten worse that I've seen. Yeah, we still get a steady stream of calls that are very similar. Prior to everyone being sheltered at home, there were a lot of calls of door-to-door salespeople. What we've seen is the senior population in Marin is very trusting. They tend to open the door. They tend to have a conversation and be very friendly and open to door-to-door salespeople, including contractors. And that's probably the number one complaint. What I've also seen is, and I published another reason that we drew attention in the consumer tips section of the Marin Independent Journal about property deed fraud and tax lien fraud is because some of our seniors have been here for a very long time and have amassed quite a bit of equity in their homes. And so the scams that we see, the financial predatory tactics that we see are essentially loans or encumbrances on a property trying to get a hold of some of that equity from the seniors. What usually happens is that I will get a call from an adult child of the senior who has already been involved in a transaction with someone and has encumbered their home or has signed some documents and is trying to figure out if they can unwind it. I think there's usually a cooling off period for some of these door-to-door contracts, which I assume would work virtually since they're not in your space. It's kind of anyone who sells you something when they're not at your home. So we try to work with people to see if they're still within the window to undo their contracts and see if they were of sound mind and capable, have the capacity to enter these contracts. I had a a senior in Marin who's now almost 100 be approached with a new innovative type of loan in exchange for adding solar panels to her bungalow, her very nice bungalow in southern Marin. And, you know, unfortunately she got caught up in that, and we worked with her attorney and her daughter to try to help that situation. There were a lot of documents involved. It involved electronic signatures of very long contracts, you know, which I probably should add to my list. If I were at a senior fair, one of the things I really try to tell people is get the paper. You know, I mean, I think seniors are actually much better at that than some of our younger folks who will just, you know, sign on an iPad and click OK. But, you know, you never really know when you have a person who shows up at your house or who is calling you, you know, cold calling you, trying to sell you some financial product. If they're just like, oh, yeah, the contract says this, please click, sign, click, sign. Again, that goes back to tip number one, take your time, you know, get the paper. That's one of the things that is unfortunate because, you know, equity isn't necessarily liquid cash, right? And some of our seniors are on a fixed income. So it does get really tricky if the transaction is too far along.
Have you seen changes in the types and or volume of disputes that are brought to you since COVID struck?
You know, I have not. Honestly, I think it's been pretty similar. We're still getting a fair number of the landlord-tenant issues. I think the one thing that's shifted a little bit in the disease claims have been a little bit more focused on immunity, or, you know, we've seen some brain health claims saying sort of, you know, keep your brain sharp and keep your immune system sharp and that kind of thing. You know, those kind of go in waves. I'm trying to think since COVID, you know, I really haven't. Yeah. They're pretty consistent, I think, other than maybe the messaging changes. The one thing that came up that was a little bit different in the government imposter scams is a few of them were talking about the Paycheck Protection Program. And so, oh, you know, I take that back. Job scams changed also. Job scams are pretty consistent, but, you know, these work from home or remote job opportunities were one type of complaint that increased because there were a lot of people whose jobs, like they decreased in hours, or they lost their jobs, or, you know, things changed and they were looking for opportunities where they didn't have to risk themselves or their families by going into a job. And so many more people were looking for remote opportunities. And there were some scammers out there creating fake job listings and trying to, you know, get people's personal information under the guise of a job application, or, you know, give us your information for direct deposit and things like that. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that you work with other counties on a task force. I was curious if you ever find yourself working with state agencies on, you know, particular matters that they may have expertise on.
Yeah, so we work with the California Attorney General's office sometimes. Like I mentioned with the infant formula case, they have a consumer unit and their jurisdiction extends across the state. So if we have a product that has a pretty large presence in California, sometimes we bring in the Attorney General. Sometimes it's sufficient if we bring in a number of other counties. It just depends on how cooperative or not the other side is. We work with the California Department of Public Health quite a bit in our disease claim cases. They do some of the analysis in terms of like supplements and their registration, their labeling, their claim analysis in terms of what's a disease claim. So they're very helpful on that front. We work a lot with the California Contractor State Licensing Board. We get a lot of contractor complaints for, they run the gamut. And so we work pretty closely with them and their investigators. Those are probably the ones that I work the most with. And then as of late, I've been working a bit more with the DMV investigations unit also, and we do some work with the California Public Utilities Commission here and there.
Okay, I was curious. I work for the Department of Insurance, so I was wondering
okay.
if you'd ever interacted with our agency.
We don't have jurisdiction over insurance matters generally. They're very heavily regulated, I think, on their own. Yeah, so they tend to be excluded from a lot of our consumer laws. And the things that I would see that are insurance are usually like a fake warranty or something like that. So it's slightly different. Yeah, thanks. And we don't regulate banks either.
With the ongoing housing shortage, which certainly has increased with fires and environmental, emergencies here in Northern California, have you dealt with more real estate fraud with rentals?
The real estate fraud that I see, so for our purposes, our definition of real estate fraud tends to be something that has a recorded document. So it usually has to do with home ownership, and we otherwise look at it as a deceptive transaction. Do you mean like fake rental listings or something like that?
Yes, fake rental listings, and also issues of unsavory practices with rent, related to demand at that time.
I haven't. There has been, I think most people have been pretty good about not, about the moratorium on rent increases or on price gouging. Although that is the price gouging for consumer products is something that also came up a bit in COVID. There were a number of smaller companies and entities charging, breaking up packs of toilet paper and selling them, one roll at a time, $5 a roll, things like that. But as far as rents, I haven't seen it. It might be that maybe some of our mediators have gotten calls. I haven't seen that directly. I've seen more of the lien, the tax lien scams or the property deed fraud.
Is it possible or likely that with COVID, with the downturn in the economy, that there would be more reticence about reporting issues like this right now?
I think consumer complaints are always underreported, and that's kind of the unfortunate thing. Usually what happens is when we get a call or a couple of calls and we start to dig a little deeper and we get customer lists, we find that there's usually a pattern if it's something that is out there that seems to be verging on the lines of fraud or a pretty large scale deception. We've seen some bait and switch advertising for consumer products out there that sort of like lure consumers to a website to purchase based on this deal or this sale. And then they get there and it's like, oh, there were only 3, no more available, and now it's twice as much. And so, I do think that as a general matter, consumers don't report. And sometimes that's because, it might be that they lost out on $10, or it might be, in some instances, folks are a little bit embarrassed to come forward. It's tricky. When I was in law school, I put my law school business card in a fishbowl at a restaurant, down the street because it said I could win a free cruise, and I'm like, well, I'm in law school, I eat free pizza 3 times a week, what do I have to lose, right? And then, you get the phone call from the cruise ship, which I don't think too many people are taking anymore, but, you get the phone call and it's like, oh, you have to pay the taxes and you have to pay the port fees and you have to pay for this and that and upgrades. And, oh, just kidding, you're, staying in a tent at the airport. And if you want to upgrade to a hotel room, so the up charges and things like that are something that I would see. And I certainly wasn't in a place to report that. I'm like, oh my God, I'm in law school. I should know better. I can't believe, and I didn't, end up paying anything, but, had I reported or known where to report, I think, and gotten over the whole thing of kind of falling for that in law school, I could have maybe helped someone. I think what we try to do to counteract that, the underreporting, is really to do more outreach and education, which, as Bill said, is a little trickier now that we didn't get to do the senior fair or the 4th of July fair. And so, we have the consumer tip, and we're doing this tonight, which I'm really grateful for, and just trying to find whatever exposure we can.
Does anyone else have any more questions?
Amber, you mentioned that you were always looking for volunteers, I'm assuming attorneys, who might like to work as mediators, volunteer mediators. Does your part of the agency need volunteers at all? Is that something you want to get a word out about, or how do you operate? Do you utilize them?
So we do utilize volunteers. It goes in cycles. I have to double check right now because we're in a phase where we're hiring our new volunteer and consumer outreach program coordinator. So one of our volunteers has actually stepped up and is our interim director. So she's sort of doing 2 jobs right now. And so I know we're down at least one. And hopefully that won't be the case anymore. But we are always checking in with our volunteers, and it just kind of depends. People tend to stay for the long haul. Not everyone is an attorney. We actually also have a full-time, I should have said, we have a full-time mediator who speaks Spanish fluently. I speak Spanish fluently. But our mediator, Maria, who speaks Spanish and handles the predominantly Spanish language consumer non-enforcement issues, is not an attorney. And I would say of our last consumer programs director was an attorney. It's not a requirement, but I think only maybe half of our volunteer mediators are attorneys. Yeah. I know there are a few of them that are accountants, because we do see some of the financial frauds on some of the landlord-tenant issues really get into the dollars and cents of security deposits and percentages and, repairs and, proportions over time and things like that. So we have some real people who are really great with numbers, and it just works nicely, but it's not a requirement. I think, if anyone were interested, they could contact us. We're definitely not like in a shortage, but as people come and go, people take on shifts of 3 to 4 hours, once or twice a week, depending on what they can do. So thank you for asking, though.
I'd like to ask one more if I can.
Sure.
Conservator abuses. Are you guys getting into that? I hear a lot of mopery going on around the county behind some of that stuff, and I'm just wondering what's happening on that.
I'm sorry, did you say conservator?
Conservator, yeah, conservator.
So like elder abuse.
By attorneys, conservator.
Oh, I see. So that would be a matter we would probably refer to, oh gosh, now I can't think of the agency my friend works for there. It's the ombudsman, who handles some more of the direct elder abuse, unless it's elder financial abuse that has to do with a consumer transaction. But if it is that direct conservatorship, and it's really, if it's not a crime, I mean, our office would handle it if it were a crime. There is an office
of Aging.
Aging, yes, thank you. The Office of Aging. I was stuck on it, but and so we would generally refer it to them. But it depends on the circumstances. It wouldn't hurt to call us, because we had for quite a while an elder fraud investigator, and we work very closely with the FAST team, which is an acronym for like financial something I can't think of, but it's basically they're community volunteers who look at financial frauds and deceptive practices in the community, and we work very closely with them. They have a lot of volunteers, and we get some of our volunteers from the FAST team. They sort of work hand in hand. Yeah, but I haven't seen it.
And of course, they used to go around and make presentations, which I guess they're not doing under COVID.
Yeah, we would sometimes share tables with them, you know, at the senior fair or other, events.
Well, thank you so much for your time tonight. This has been very helpful and informative.
Yeah, thank you all so much for putting on this program and for making us available as a resource to the community. I'm happy to have been able to highlight this service that not everyone in the county is aware of. So, you know, just remember, we do have these free mediation services. They are voluntary, and you can call us. We'll be your buddy if you have a question about a potential scam or fraud or suspicious communication. So I certainly appreciate the time. I'm very grateful to all of you, Denise and Chris and Lori and the board and the bar and our guests who took the time away from everything going on around us to learn about our Consumer and Environmental Protection Unit. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Amber, we'll try and let you
Thank
know
you.
when this film is finally available.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
You too. Bye-bye.